From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, September 28th, 2 p.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We'll first hear from County Counsel Margot Raison for a report taken on action in closed session.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. This morning you met in closed sessions on items 62 and 64. I'm sorry, 62, 63, and 64. There's no reportable action on items 62 or 64, but on item number 63, I am reporting that Pam Singh, our public defender, requested that your board accept her resignation. Your board did so. She indicated that she desires to return to being a full-time trial attorney with the Public Defender's Office and to be able to spend more time with her family. She will continue serving as the public defender until your board has found a replacement for her.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin by considering the consent agenda. All items listed with a CA or a C above the items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. The CA represents the consent agenda for the Board of Supervisors, while the C represents the consent agenda for the Kern Sanitation Authority and the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the public wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. Members of the public may also comment on any closed session item. At this time, I'll read the consent agenda item numbers for the Board of Supervisors agenda, and that is items 7 and 8 on page 3, item 9 on page 4, item 10 on page 5, 11 through 17 on page 6, 18 through 23 on page 7, 25 through 29, as well as 31 through 33 on page 8, and lastly, items 34 and 35 on page 9. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak on the consent agenda? Would the board like any item removed for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda and to adjourn as the Board of Supervisors and reconvene as the Kern Sanitation Authority.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Perez.
Okay, we're now sitting as the Kern Sanitation Authority and will consider the consent agenda, which includes items C1 and C2. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak regarding the consent agenda for the Kern Sanitation Authority? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve and adjourn as the Kern Sanitation Authority and reconvene as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District.
So moved.
The motion is approved. 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Perez.
Okay, we're now sitting as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District and will consider the consent agenda item, the consent agenda, which includes items C3 and C4. Is there anyone that would like to speak for the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District's consent agenda? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda and adjourn as Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District and reconvene as the Kern County Board of Supervisors.
Motion.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Perez.
We reconvene as the Kern County Board of Supervisors and will now consider item number 5, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we will now consider item number 6, board member announcements or reports.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Supervisor Couch.
I have a referral I want to make to staff, and maybe it's just information, but if you want to come back with a broader discussion, I'd be happy to have that. I'm interested in getting my arms around and understanding better all of the requirements that we have, for example, under AB 1383, the recycling mandates, and also some of the requirements that we have, or just the efforts that we're making on job retraining. For example, the Recycling Lives program, and how we might better utilize some of the funding that is available. For example, I just learned that there's several $1 million available through Caltrans District 6 for what, I don't know. That's the key. How could we utilize those funds and others and have a better understanding of the needs and the opportunities we have and the funding that's currently available that might not have been there previously? Is that vague enough and clear enough at the same time?
Yes, we will prepare that and come back and provide your board an overview of those efforts.
Okay, any other announcements or reports from the board? I would like to make one announcement at the request of Supervisor Perez. Mr. Jonathan Webster, who was a longtime member of the Kern County Housing Commission, recently passed away. He was a District 5 appointee, and so we're going to adjourn today's memory in his honor. Absolutely. So we'll now consider item number 24 under the Human Resources Division, a proposed memorandum of understanding with the Kern County Prosecutors Association for wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment through June 30th, 2024. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Devin Brown.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The item before you is a proposed 3-year memorandum of understanding with our Kern County Prosecutors Association through June 30th of 2024. Kern County's 2021-2026 strategic plan includes the key objective to be a model of excellence in managing our business and our workforce. Included under that objective are the goals of attracting, developing, and retaining top talent across all business areas of the county. The plan identifies the need to ensure competitive compensation practices and to reform our countywide compensation system to enable regular cost of living adjustments. The proposed memorandum of understanding with the Kern County Prosecutors Association takes a significant step toward achieving these objectives for the employees they represent. The key substantive provisions within this MOU are not only the 3-year contract term, but a 3% equity adjustment, bringing all of the prosecutors and the child support attorneys in line with our deputy public defender classifications. In addition, they would receive additional incremental 2% COLA steps through our new 10-step COLA step salary schedule, effective January 1st of 2022, a 2.5% COLA effective July 2nd, 2022, and in addition to those wage increases, we've agreed to provide them with additional paid time off during our holiday season, which we traditionally know as winter recess, for this year, next year, and the following year after that. The jointly proposed MOU exemplifies a necessary restructure of our compensation system, affording all employees more regular wage growth throughout the tenure of their employment with the county. The restructured salary schedule increases the entry-level salary for all represented positions to better position our district attorney and our Department of Child Support Services with recruiting new attorneys to fill vacant and vital positions. It also provides regular and sustainable base wage growth of 2% each year for a total of 9 years for new employees. This structure also affords the county the ability to offer additional COLAs at a more regular interval to ensure that we are keeping pace with the labor market and the rising cost of living. And starting on July 20 of 2022, there is a 2.5% COLA in addition to the COLA steps. The proposed MOU also continues your board's approach to ensuring that overtime is paid according to the Fair Labor Standards Act requirements by eliminating overtime and compensatory time off eligibility for our overtime exempt attorney positions. The MOU adds winter recess, as I mentioned, and if those attorneys end up working during that holiday season, they will get 3 additional floating days off to use in the subsequent calendar year. A really good benefit for our workforce. The total fiscal impact of this proposed 3-year MOU is $1.41 million. Most of that is in our district attorney's budget unit. Our child support department has 5 attorneys that are impacted with a fiscal impact of $80,000 for that department. Our county council has approved this MOU as to form, and it's our recommendation that your board approve the memorandum of understanding with the Kern County Prosecutors Association and direct the Human Resources Division to implement the changes. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion on staff's recommendation.
So moved.
Is there a second? Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, thank you. With that, our next item is the redistricting, and number 30, and that has to begin at 3 o'clock. So we're going to take a brief recess until that time. That's item 30 under County Council. And so with that, we are recessed until 3 o'clock. Madam Clerk, please let the record reflect that the board has now reconvened with all members present. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our interpreter, Mr. Fernando Lopez, who is available for anyone in the audience requiring translation of the proceedings from English to Spanish, or for anyone who would like to address the board that would require translation services. Mr. Lopez, would you please share this information?
Sure.
Thank you.
Antes de comenzar con el artículo número 30, yo soy Fernando López, me han contratado para interpretarles. Si hay alguien presente en el auditorio que necesita servicios de intérprete, atrás en la mesa hay audífonos para proporcionar esos servicios. Gracias.
Thank you. We will now consider item number 30 under County Council, a presentation on final 2020 census data and a public hearing to receive testimony on redistricting criteria and communities of interest, and lastly, provide direction on draft district plans. And I will turn it over to our County Council.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. During your February 23rd, 2021 meeting, you directed staff to initiate the process of redistricting, something that occurs every 10 years. Since that time, Jason Wiebe, Amanda Reese, both with the CAO's office, Deputy County Counsel Stephanie Bowie, and I have been meeting, developing, and implementing a series of steps along the redistricting path to ensure all legal processes and laws are followed. We've been assisted by outside legal counsel and demography experts. The purpose of today's agenda item is to provide your board and the public with information about the census data and to receive additional public comment. At the conclusion of the agenda item, I will be asking for direction regarding preparation of draft maps. Mr. Wiebe will explain in greater detail all that has transpired thus far, but we've had numerous public workshop and trainings covering what redistricting is, training on the online redistricting tool, and workshops where we've received public comment and invited people to submit their ideas about community of interests, even having maps available so people can draw their ideas and submit those ideas. All written comments and maps have been preserved and provided to the demography expert. We've had Spanish and Punjabi translations, which also reminds me that I want to thank Elsa Martinez, Pavan Gill, Laura Meza, and Fernando Lopez for their translation assistance. The county has a dedicated website that is updated regularly. The online redistricting tool can be accessed from that website. The final census data was released last week. Paul Mitchell of Redistricting Partners, our demography expert, is here to share with your board specifics about the 2020 census data. Chris Scannell with the law firm of Nielsen Merksmer is also here today. Following Mr. Mitchell's presentation, it is appropriate to receive public comment. After public comment, if you, board members, have any commentary you would like Redistricting Partners to take into account about your district, this is your first opportunity to provide such. The more feedback and guidance your board is able to provide throughout this process, the more information the demographer will have as draft maps are drawn. For instance, you might be aware of communities of interest that should be preserved or included by the consultants. Redistricting Partners has further access to the public testimony and written submissions received to date, identifying additional communities of interest. However, you can also wait and review the initial maps next month and provide feedback at that time. At the conclusion of board comments, if any, I will ask your board to provide direction to staff and the demographer consultant to prepare initial draft district plans to be presented at your October 26th meeting. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Wiebe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jason Wiebe with the Kern County Administrative Office. I just want to briefly provide your board with some history and context leading up to Mr. Mitchell's presentation from Redistricting Partners to get into the details. But if we could get the first slide up related to considerations for district lines. Just want to provide a little bit of history since we last reported to your board in late February, some of the considerations that you're required to keep in mind as we develop district lines. First, they should be kept together. Contiguity, meaning sharing a common border with other districts, should be a consideration. You need to try as much as feasible to minimize division of local neighborhoods or communities of interest. Communities of interest will be a large focus of this meeting, as it has been our prior workshops and meetings, defining those and identifying those. You should maintain geographic integrity of a city or census designated place as much as feasible. Fourth consideration is boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable, such as streets, mountains, or rivers or riverbeds. Districts should be compact, not stretched to include specific neighborhoods or communities, and boundaries cannot be drawn to favor or discriminate against a political party. So just some considerations to keep in mind as we discuss communities of interest and what makes sense for those communities in particular districts. Next, I'd like to briefly kind of talk about the outreach. It's an ongoing process. We've done some things. We'll continue to do some things up until district lines are actually adopted. So far, we've held 5 community meetings. They've all been in the evening or on Saturdays, 6 p.m. in the evening, or we did one Saturday, 10 a.m. meeting. We did one of those community meetings exclusively in Spanish. with English translation if English speakers wanted to listen in on that. Again, we have done outreach in addition to just setting meetings and hoping people will come to us. We've outreached to particular organizations and groups, chambers of commerce, and other organizations that will be interested in hearing what we have to say and hear encouragement on how they can get involved. We're also offering in-person opportunities at all library branches. Some people feel a more traditional approach to dropping off paper recommendations or maps. So all of our library branches and all of our Kern County communities are available to receive input and communities of interest feedback. Our Division of Communications has used local media outlets as well as social media to get the word out for different ways of providing input. We have an email list of organizations that were involved with the 2020 census, which has grown since then to nearly 200 organizations and individuals that we send updates and information out to. And we have an English and Spanish website as well. So those are some of the things we've done and continue to do. All of that is to get people involved, and there's several different ways to get involved. On our website, you can submit a map or community of interest form with the website information up on the screen. We have an instructional video for those that need help on the software mapping tool. That is in both Spanish and English for those that want that tutorial or informational video. You can also email us with any information or public comment or maps that you've developed on your own. We also have a phone number. The phone number up there, 661-868-3139, if you prefer to call and leave your feedback or provide information or request more information from us. Again, I mentioned the library branches in virtually every community in Kern County has information that you can provide related to communities of interest or feedback. And of course, we're going to encourage people to continue to provide their input at future public hearings. We have public hearings at future board meetings on October 26th at 3 o'clock, an evening hearing on November 8th at 6 p.m., and another hearing at 3 p.m. on November 16th. So again, that's just some of what we've done and will continue to do to get the community involved, to solicit feedback and input and interest in this process. And with that, I will turn it over to redistricting partners Paul Mitchell to get into more detail on where we're headed from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm with Redistricting Partners. We're back here today to go through a presentation on, again, this redistricting process that we're undergoing, the role of public engagement, the data on the current lines, and then also a little bit of where we go from here, how we bridge from that receipt of community of interest testimony and input to the actual creation of draft and then final maps for you to adopt. The timeline, as you can see on the slide, has us beginning with our outreach over the summer and into the fall. The prison population reallocation was just conducted. We just received that data, which means that we now have the census data that is ready for redistricting in the format that the statewide database is created for the redistricting. It's required under the Fair Maps Act. In October, we're going to be coming back here to present draft maps, and that's a critical part of today's session, is to hear from the public and hear from you on that. And then the deadline for the Board of Supervisors to adopt final plans is December 15th. If you looked at some of our earlier materials and presentations we did to the public and some of our outreach meetings that we did, you might have heard us talk about that this date might change. We now feel that that date is not going to change. There was some discussion about a legislative adjustment to that date, maybe either aligning that date to the December 27th date that the State Redistricting Commission has, or maybe into January 14th was another date being considered. But nothing ever happened on that legislation, so the December 15th date is your final deadline. This deadline also means that if the board was unable to pass a plan by that time, that the county supervisors would lose jurisdiction over the redistricting. and that a court would be the ones that draws the lines. So that's something that your legal counsel can discuss, but just to put a little emphasis on that December 15th date, that's a pretty hard date. We've been doing aggressive outreach to the community, as was already discussed. And this outreach has involved input in a number of different fashions. We've had public testimony at our hearings. We've also had an online community of interest forum on the website, and the ability for the public to receive or to send information into the county via email or through these forums to get their voice heard about their community of interest. We also have a mapping tool. This is something that was maybe somewhat possible in 2010, 2011 in the last redistricting cycle. There were some online mapping tools at the time. They were so unwieldy that the most usage of them happened in like centers that the State Redistricting Commission set up, so you could go in, get assistance in using the tool and draw lines. There's been a real proliferation of this in this redistricting cycle, with those tools getting a lot easier to use, and we now see more and more agencies using them. We in California have 30 clients that are using online mapping tools for their local redistricting. Your online tool has allowed people for quite a while to draw their communities of interest, and I'll talk about that a little bit as I get to those slides. But also, as of yesterday, now people can draw full district plans. So it's set up to allow people to draw district plans, to show them the deviations in their plans, the composition of each of their districts, and then submit those as public testimony. The input that's coming in is that community of interest feedback. This is members of the public thinking about their districts, thinking about the county, and trying to identify who they are, how they fit within the puzzle pieces of potential new district lines. I've provided some examples of some of this community of interest testimony that we've seen for you to see, but this is just the very tip of the iceberg. We expect to see a lot of community of interest testimony from people who are trying to identify communities that should be protected in the redistricting process. And I want to speak to that just for a second, in that community of interest to some people sounds like a totally new term. And it seems unclear what a community of interest really is. The state law says that a community of interest is a set of characteristics, socioeconomic, demographic characteristics, that can describe a community in a way that it can be drawn within a single district to improve their representation and voting power. The idea is that, let's say, I'll pick an example from some other area. Let's say there was a part of town that was all surfers, and they needed access to the beach, they needed places to park, they needed other things that the city or county government could help them with. If they were drawn into 4 different districts, they'd have no county supervisor or council member to go to with that need. They'd have nobody to fight for them. But if they could be put in one district in a way that strengthens them, then they would have the ability to use that districting process to have better representation. And so when we see these community of interest testimony, we should be thinking about it in the context of how can this community be strengthened through the districting process. In addition to that community of interest testimony that comes from online and emails, we also have the ability for people to draw physical maps. We've got some examples of these at the back, and when we had, the last time I was here, we had members of the community, just like today, coming up and using markers and drawing their communities of interest and submitting those as actual testimony. We had those both in Spanish and in English, and both with the full countywide picture and then one zoom in to Bakersfield and the surrounding community so people could look at more specific elements. Some of the online mapping submissions we've had in this tool for drawing communities of interest includes maps like this. Some of this input was actually people trying to draw full district plans, it seems. But they also were drawing their communities and describing how they see the region. And I just had a few that we put in here, but like I said, I think by the time we come back in October, there will be dozens of these. Just want to be able to let you see those just as a point of reference. One of the things that the online tool allows you to do is not only draw areas, but also identify points on the map that you want to make sure could be put into a district and describe it. As we enter this, obviously you did a redistricting in, if I'm correct, 2018. You did that redistricting in 2018, but that doesn't mean that the data for your plan is only 2 or 3 years old. The data that you had to use to define your redistricting and the size of each district was the 2010 Decennial Census. So the data to draw those lines in 2018 is actually now 10 years old. We have provided packets with the current district lines that include an overview page, data tables with the population, ethnic population, and citizen voting age population for each of the districts. And then for each district, a zoom-in picture of that district along with that same information. This is this packet with these 7 pages is going to be a packet that we're going to make for every public submission. So anybody who submits a plan on the online tool, or like the plan that some advocates have brought forward today, we will be converting it to our format as well, so you can look at all potential drafting options with the same tools. If we look at your district and dive in, I want to highlight a couple things that are in this map and in this data. This data table includes both decennial census data and data from the American Community Survey, which is an ongoing survey that is conducted every year. The data from the decennial census is at the top, and the most important part of that is this population data. You can see for each district its population from the decennial census, and this again includes the reallocation of population based on the reallocation of prison population. What I want to draw your eye to is that District 2 and District 5, you can see, have the lowest and highest deviation, which means how far they are away from the ideal district size. The way that you get the full plan deviation is by taking the sum of those absolute values. That's a fancy way of saying the distance between those two numbers, which in this case is 9.5. The legal requirement is that a district be within 10%. So based on this, you would still be within that 10%, but that doesn't mean that you can just say we're done and move on. You still have to do all the process that's required under the Fair Maps Act. The citizen voting age population is where we go to look for the potential voting power of each of the ethnic communities in any Voting Rights Act concerns and in a Voting Rights Act case. Draw your eye on that to 2 districts right now that are over 60% Latino by citizen voting age population. And this is something that whenever we talk about the Voting Rights Act and we talk about these districts and what may or may not be required of the board in terms of how these are constructed under the Voting Rights Act, that's right when we're going to go hand it over to the attorney to, talk about some of these issues. Because as he'll tell you, you may have a responsibility, as you did in 2018, to draw districts in a manner that doesn't dilute the voting power of these protected minority groups. At the same time, you're not allowed to go in and just start redistricting with, let's draw districts predominantly based on race. There's a conflict in the 2 things I just said, but it is how the law works. Different constitutional rights come into conflict, and that's why we will lean on legal counsel when it comes to those issues. I think one of the most important things for you as the supervisors here today is to think about the fact that we are entering a phase of going from that community input to a period of actually constructing and creating draft plans. We need feedback from the community and from the supervisors on what you want to see in those plans, provided that all of the plans that we develop for you are going to be meeting the required criteria, following the Voting Rights Act, dealing with those issues of compactness, contiguity, equal population, and so on. The feedback we want is on what potential versions within that frame you would like to see. So if we know we're going to draw districts that are compact and contiguous, there might be opportunities to take two communities that are currently in different districts and put them in the same district. Or maybe there's a community that's split in the current redistricting and you want to see if it can be made whole. Or maybe there's a better way for the lines to represent the agricultural community or the urban community. And those kind of considerations, in addition to the required criteria, we would consider that in creating additional versions of plans for you. One of the versions we would likely create would be minimal change, taking the existing lines, knowing that they're already within the 10% deviation, and making smaller adjustments in order to maybe unify a city, make a district more compact, or deal with other small issues around the map, but not make as significant of change. At the same point, there might be some requests for versions that would create more significant change, and we're happy to make sure that you get that full range of options in what we provide. Like I said before, the structure of what we give you is going to be for every public map, you'll have that same cover page, data table, and individual district pages. We're also going to provide you with a little summary sheet of every publicly submitted plan and all of our plans. This summary sheet will have a thumbnail of the map. It'll have a link to its online page if it was created in Districtor. It will have information on are the districts, what's the deviation of these districts? Are they compact? Are they contiguous? Those would be the kind of objective measures. And then we might also have some notes if maybe this is the plan that unifies the town that the supervisor was interested in unifying. We would put that in there to make it clear what this plan is trying to achieve. If the plan was submitted by the public and there's a short statement that they put in there, a reason why that plan was created, we would include that in the summary sheet. The draft maps will actually be not only given to you to look at, but they'll be provided to the public on the website 7 days in advance of your hearing. What we want to get is that input from the public and at that hearing get input from you on potential changes. So when we actually have that hearing on the draft plans we're providing, don't treat it as we're giving these immovable objects. We have to just pick one. It's more about an iterative process, looking at the maps, making recommended changes, and maybe trying to figure out which maps you can develop some consensus around. In the future hearings and in meetings prior to the adoption, we want to work with you on trying to get to a point where you can select a single draft map. And then the idea under the state law is to have a single draft map that you've selected, agendize it, have it public for 7 days, and then have an up or down vote on it without any changes. And if you were to make changes to those maps, it would essentially restart that clock, and you would have to have another meeting, have the map public. If you're right up to that day, December 15th, we can talk to legal counsel about what kind of shortening of that window can be allowed, but you still would be required to make that map public and then have that up or down vote. So one of the principles in here, and I'm saying this as much for you as for the public, is that at no time will, in California, any city council or county supervisors be able to walk into the final map hearing, pull a map out of their back pocket and say, let's all just vote on this plan and pass it. It's just not allowed under the law anymore. Under the law, the only plans that can be passed are ones that have been made available to the public, where the public's been able to have input. And our job as your consultants, working with your legal counsel and your staff, is to help facilitate that. And with that, I'm happy to close and answer any questions.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Are there any questions at this point from the board? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open public comment. And so if there's anybody wishing to speak on this item, now would be the time if you could come down to the podium. Speakers have 2 minutes. Just please state and spell your name.
I'm sorry, can you confirm that it's 2 minutes only?
That's the process we normally go. Do you have a larger presentation?
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay. Can we see how many speakers we have that would like to address the board, and then we can see what time we have at the
Yeah, thank
later
you.
on? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone that would like to speak under public comment?
Hello,
Hi.
I am Annette Longquist. I have attended 2 of the redistricting meetings online, and I'm glad we're able to attend today. I've lived in the county for 30 years, and in that time, we've had 3 supervisors. They've all been wonderful. We had a situation occur about 10 years ago that needed attention. Our supervisor made sure that county employees came to our area and worked with us and remedied the situation. We were very pleased about that. I see the supervisors fighting for their constituents. I pay attention. I listen to the news, I read the paper, I watch it online. I know what's going on. I try to be involved and pay attention. And I see all of the supervisors working for their constituents. They work hard. In regards to the boundaries, the districts appear to be fairly drawn. I'm not a map maker, so I understand that there are some changes that might be made with streets being moved, but I don't really see a drastic change. And you're talking about communities of interest. Aren't all of our communities of interest? Mine is, yours is, everyone's is. I think everybody should be treated fairly, no matter what, ethnicity, skin color, religion, whatever. We're all here together. We all live in Kern County. And I like to think that we all get along. So I think that in the sense that our supervisors are on the front line, I see them working very, very hard. And I just wanted it to be known that I approve of what they're doing. I know they're working hard for us, and I appreciate everything they've done.
Thank you. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Patty Vignolo, V as in Victor, I-G-N like Nancy, O-L-O, and this is my first Board of Supervisors meeting. I lived in District 1 for about 14 years, and then I moved over to District 4, and I've been there for 5 years. I just want to reiterate the importance that your constituents are placing on you to make really good decisions regarding this and every decision that you make for the county. So if you could just please, I know you have so many things going on in your lives, you have so many things going on with the district. If you could please just take that one moment of pause and just really be determined to make a really good decision on behalf of all your constituents regarding this particular redistricting issue. I can tell you on behalf of all of us, we thank you. And keep up the good work.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Hi, my name is Linda Willis, W-I-L-L-I-S. I've been jotting down notes as people have been speaking, so I might be a little bit scattered here. I think the district lines should be drawn as to be what's fair and appropriate without manipulating of the numbers to guarantee a particular desired outcome. I believe it was Mr. Wiebe who stated that the lines should not be drawn in favor of one political party, and I believe that is what the attempt is being made at right now. As I recall back in 2018, the lines defining the districts were greatly redrawn per an agreement between several communities of interest and the Board of Supervisors, and that redrawing of particularly Supervisor Couch's district has proven to be beneficial to those he represents, as proven by his forced election when the lines were redrawn, as well as his subsequent reelection. Tampering with the district lines has come to be political only in nature and not for the well-being of residents. As the two ladies before me spoke, we are completely happy with the way that our lines are drawn right now, being that we are within 10% of the deviation. Minor changes might be necessary, but we do not believe in any major rehaul of the districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. All prior redistricting hearings offered an option for people to call in.
Excuse me, can you provide your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Lori Pesante, P-E-S-A-N-T-E, but I have someone who was relying on what had been past practice to participate in these redistricting hearings through a call-in. And then when it was not offered today for the first time in which we're in front of the actual Board of Supervisors, she didn't have the ability to participate. She runs an African-American parent group in California City, and driving to Bakersfield was going to be prohibitive. So I have her on the line, and if I could mic her in, that would be great.
I'm not sure, so we didn't notice this as a call-in option. Most of our board meetings don't have that option. That was something that was done with the hearings that were held out in the public during some of the COVID requirements. I don't know that we can do that at this point. Sure.
Kathy, is there another way? I understand the process issue, and I want to be sensitive to that, Lori, okay? Is there a way to receive that input, they can send an email? Whatever statement would be made now, send it an email, and it would be incorporated into this process?
Yes, we are currently accepting emails. In fact, at the beginning of the meeting, one of the deputy clerks from my office brought down an email that had just been emailed to us. So if anyone would like to email the clerk of the board, they can email clerkofboard@kerncounty.com. We will receive those emails, we will print them off, and have them delivered to the dais.
Lori, that may be the best we can do. I can't make a decision on my own. My colleagues can weigh in on their own. That's really their decision-making process. But we do have a process, and if it hasn't been followed, there is an alternative to at least receive the information, have it within, the record process. And I don't know what you're going to say to that. I'm not the chair. Please forgive me, Chair.
Well, it has happened in the past that people have been able to be mic'd in this way on prior Board of Supervisors meetings. And since this has been available at every other redistricting hearing, and we only get to do this once every 10 years, I would like to request the ability to do this right now.
Okay, well, at this point, we haven't been doing this at our Board of Supervisors meetings, which this is, and we will have another redistricting meeting for the Board of Supervisors. And we can try and accommodate that or talk about accommodations at that point. At this point, the person you have online can still call and leave a message to the clerk of the board, can still send an email that we can receive, and her input will still be received into the record. So
you're going to deny her right now? The ability to speak right now? She's right here right now. She can go right now.
I'm going to defer to County Council on this. This wasn't noticed as a meeting where people can call in, so that's not what the Board of Supervisors has been doing, so.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that is in your discretion, but this meeting was not noticed as a remote meeting because the Board of Supervisors has not been holding remote meetings once you decided to go back to an all in-person meeting. We are exploring the feasibility of having the future redistricting board meetings, the unique board meetings related to redistricting, provide for remote comment, but that was not noticed for today. One suggestion might be if the person on the call emails or texts Ms. Pesante, then she could read this statement that the caller would like to make.
Okay, great. Would that work for you?
Right now, for her to reduce what she could say right now in 2 minutes to writing right now and then have me read it right now?
Yes.
That's what you're offering?
Yes. I'm trying to be accommodating. We're not going to change the rules. ad hoc in the middle of the meeting, but you're welcome to do that if you'd like.
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Lori, part of the issue up here is we don't know who's on the phone. We don't know if curse words are going to be used. We don't have a way to hold a person accountable or shut them off now. You have control of the volume. I appreciate that, okay? I don't know who's on the phone, and I don't mean anything personal by it. I'm saying that there's a process here because we have a decorum that we have to follow in order to be appropriate and to respect each other. And part of it is really, we usually screen callers ahead of time so that we know that they are in the queue waiting. They usually do this days in advance so that we know, and usually our chair, the sixth supervisor will tell us in the morning who's waiting and who's in the queue so that we, can keep it, profanity out, politics, the kind of a personal agenda stuff that makes it messy in here. So, I'm stuck in between this. I don't appreciate it, but I do like the idea of if your caller could email it, maybe you could have a seat, email it or text it to you, and if you could get up and read it once you've had a chance as a lawyer to review it and know that it's not inappropriate for this setting. That's the best I can do, Lori. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good evening, Board of Supervisors. My name is Cecilia Delgado. I live in Bakersfield, but I work in the community of Lamont, Weed Patch, and Arvin as a community organizer with Vecinos Unidos chapters, which is Neighbors United for the Lotus Wertha Foundation, and we're all in support of the current Equity Coalition map. First off, I was not happy that we don't have any call-ins. Just like you mentioned, a lot of our participants in that area are not tech savvy, they're not able to email, so they're used to calling in previous redistricting meetings. Our Vecinos is a group of community activists who are concerned with improving the quality of life of our Latino Spanish-speaking members. We come together to address concerns regarding safety communities, paved streets, sidewalks, linings, parks, sports for youth, job, and access to affordable housing. We all strongly support the Equity Coalition map because it will allow us to join together with nearby communities in South and East Bakersfield. The redistricting is needed because it is not feasible for any vecinos to be placed in the same district with the rich communities like the Seven Oaks, because they don't share the same needs and communities of interest. The proposed map will empower them to connect with the Latino majority that shares their culture, language, and occupations, as well as common social issues. We are requesting that you please support our efforts for fair representation by providing current Equity Coalition map. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Isidra Osby, and I have a comment about the redistricting. Sorry, I'm on the clock. Anyhow, I live in the 5th District, and I'm a lifelong resident of Kern County, the city of Bakersfield, and I support the Equity Coalition map. I am from a community of interest, the Black community, and as the maps are represented today, they divide us. We are a very small population, and it would be equitable to put us all together in the same district, because the splitting of us is not in our best interest. It does not allow us to build any power or equity as it currently stands. And so I ask that you support the Equity Coalition map and take care of our Black families. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
My name is Sheila Henderson, and I live in District 1. I'm a realtor in Bakersfield. Excuse me. As a realtor, I'm concerned with communities of interest. This seems to encourage pockets that are exclusive and not inclusive. When we have an inclusive neighborhood or community, we tend to come together and work out our problems and differences that we have in each group. To say that our supervisors cannot represent people of all interest groups would demean the position and the supervisor. 2 years ago, our district lines were reviewed and changed. These changes must be disruptive to our supervisors and to their communities. I hope you will be sensitive to this when you're making your decision. I live in District 1, as I said. I am very pleased with our district. I think our supervisor has been very accommodating and very attentive. I watch the news and I know what's going on in our community. I know they're dealing with homeless, budget issues, lack of workforce, and reduction of oil revenues. I understand you have problems up there, and I'm just wanting to speak in favor of our supervisors and the job that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon. My name's Sonia Bennett, and I currently live in the Ridgeview area of Bakersfield, and I support the Equity Coalition map. I support this map as it draws fair and effective Voting Rights Act districts created by the community and is based on equity indicators like pollution burden and socioeconomic factors. I am currently in District 2 and do not share the issues of the desert and mountain areas that are located. Communities that are located in the White Lane Taft Highway corridor for the proposed District 4 bear the same pollution burdens as rural farm worker communities, issues such as air quality and cleanup of the ag lands that we live on. I wish I had the same experience with the board that the prior speakers had, but I don't feel that some of the communities of color have been treated fairly in the past, as the MALDEF suit bears. So please consider the Equity Coalition map and keep our communities of interest as one.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Supervisors, my name is Jesus Garcia, GARCIA, and I am the consultant that drew the community equity maps. I'd like to thank you for selecting redistricting partners. I think you have done an excellent choice in them. I also like to agree with your counsel because they laid out the framework that you're dealing with. You have legal requirements that mandate some things. What are some of those things? First of all, you have to create voting rights districts. That's in the law. It has to occur. People have mentioned the 2018. Well, there was another set of maps, the 94 maps. In both cases, the Board of Supervisors changed its boundaries because of either of legal or because of threat of legal. Let's not do that this time. Board, you need to rise to the occasion. We have a transformational change occurring here in Kern County and throughout the whole San Joaquin Valley. I'm drawing maps for here, for Kings, for Tulare, for Madera, for Merced. The exact same conversation is happening in all of those districts. The Central Valley is going through a transformational change. That needs to also be reflected in the board. We have drawn lines that, as your attorney mentioned, follow natural borders, streets, highways, roads. We have included communities of interest, all the mountain districts, all the desert districts are together. And for folks that say that that district is too large, well, District 4 has all the farm worker communities together as well. So all of our lines, oh, and by the way, our deviation is less than 0.5%. So there's no need to go to 10%. Let's set a target of 1%. Okay, our maps are now at 0.5%. We can, we'll give in a little bit. But basically, again, the valley is going through a transformational change, and the laws require that these adopted. It's not about how we like each other or how we all love each other. I love all my neighbors, but we need to rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
All right, I am Lori Pasante, and I am reading this on behalf of Tammy Tyler, a parent advocate for the African American Parent Committee in California City. Hi, my name is Tammy Tyler. I live in California City, California, and my community and I support the Equity Coalition map. It empowers all communities, and especially the Black community and other members of communities of color. The Voting Rights Act districts are effective, not just compliant. I propose the District 1. I love that it's got the mountain communities, the high desert communities. We have a lot of the same problems. We have unmet basic needs like access to the internet and healthcare and hospitals and fire issues. Being connected to Bakersfield means that the supervisor is beholden to Bakersfield, where it's more densely populated. Additionally, Kern is large, and the rural and mountain desert area is pretty sparsely populated. It's inevitable that a district is going to have to be big because Kern County is big. We have shared interests and should be together in the same district. Finally, there's a problem with racism in Kern County. The women speaking earlier who are happy all happen to be white. Equitable maps and fair maps are really important. There are a lot of parents with the same problems. We want people that care. The Equitable Coalition map represents all people in Kern County.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Hello, my name is Sonia Norwood, Norwood, and I am a resident of Kern County. However, I support the Equity Coalition map because it accurately reflects all Kern population. Also, let me get my glasses. It was created by the community. It draws fair and effective voting rights at districts. It keeps equal population in each district. It does not use political party or current supervision home information. It stops the cycle of lawsuits, which wastes a lot of taxpayers' money. And it's based on equity indicators like population burdens and COVID-19 and social economic factors. Thank you for listening and your time.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please? Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Camila Chavez. I'm the Executive Director of the Dolores Wertha Foundation. The DHF has been working on redistricting for the past 5 years. We engaged with the Board of Supervisors on the Luna case to redraw the county districts in 2018. DHF then worked on the Kern High School District later that year and Kern Community College District in 2020. DHF has trained, engaged, and empowered hundreds of Kern County residents in this important civic endeavor. Now we're back to discuss the Board of Supervisor districts, a process that only happens every 10 years. We are excited to be here in partnership with the following organizations: the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, the Central Labor Council, Central Valley United for Power, SEIU Local 521, United Domestic Workers, and other organizations and individuals who are part of the Equitable Maps Coalition. The maps being presented today have been developed in collaboration with hundreds of Kern County residents, and our collective experiences have brought this quantitative data to life, quantitative and qualitative data to life. The maps the Equity Coalition are proposing enlarge what is currently District 1. I am a resident of Keene, a mountain community in the Tehachapi foothills, and I think that District 1 does a great job of keeping our mountain communities together. Kernville, Lake Isabella, Tehachapi, Mojave, California City, Fraser Park, and Taft have a lot in common. We share the same geographic characteristics and resource challenges as well. We are challenged with fire zones, limited health facilities, public transportation, to name a few. I ask that the mountain and high desert communities be acknowledged as a community of interest and kept together in the same district, District 1, as proposed by the Equity Coalition map, and that it be adopted by the Board of Supervisors. The geography is large, yet the populations are equal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Ma'am, unfortunately, right now, you've already spoken once, so no, unfortunately, we're just going through one speaker at a time right now. Are there any other public speakers? Okay, Ms. Pasante, would you like to? Oh, Mr. Weavy?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to make the board and the public aware that there are several written public comments that through the redistricting process, I will read into the record. There's probably about a dozen, which may take 15 to 20 minutes. So I don't know how you want to proceed with Ms. Pasante, if you want me to go last or have Ms. Pasante go last. So
if we give you, double the time, give you 4 minutes, is that enough to go through your presentation? How much time are you thinking you need? Okay, so.
I don't know that 4 minutes will be enough to be able to do that, but if Mr. Weavy has additional, shorter comments that he would like to read first from online, that's fine with me.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Weavy.
okay, I apologize in advance if I get the name, mispronounce the name, but I'm going to go through these in sequence as quickly as I can while maintaining the integrity of the comments that were provided. I'll start with number 1, Kathleen Weinstein. My name is Kathleen Weinstein, and I live in Pine Mountain Club. My community and I support the Equity Coalition map because rural Kern County deserves its own recognition. It is a fair map. It reflects the actual demographic makeup of Kern County. It takes politics and gerrymandering out of redistricting. It will save all of us taxpayers in Kern County money by avoiding the lawsuits that will follow if fair redistricting is bypassed again. Kern County does not have the money to waste on lawsuits. The Equity Coalition map puts communities of interest together. Rural Kern County needs its own supervisor to look to the needs of the high desert and mountain communities. Broadband, healthcare, fire mitigation, and drinkable water. The Equity Coalition map represents all of Kern County. Okay, public comment number 2 from Eliana Honeycutt. Ms. Honeycutt writes, I live in current District 3, Mike Maggar's district, and my community and I support the Equity Coalition map because it accurately reflects all Kern County populations. This map was created by the community, guided by an experienced demographer and statistician, and took into account over 200 community of interest surveys. These proposed lines were refined by hundreds of Kern County residents on a weekly basis over the course of several months. The Equity Coalition map creates fair lines based on equity indicators like pollution burden, COVID impact, and socioeconomic factors. This map draws fair and effective voting rights districts and stops the wasting of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars by stopping the cycle of Kern County redistricting lawsuits. Our current lines, based on the settlement map this board enacted, are based on census data from 11 years ago. The Equity Coalition map, of course, takes into account the most recent 2020 census data to accurately reflect population changes in our county. Sorry, Ms. Honeycutt continues, not only does this map reflect the most recent population changes, but also it keeps my community of interest together, which would be proposed District 5 that encompasses Lamont, Arvin, Weed Patch, Fairfax, the 93307 zip code, and Southeast Bakersfield. I ask that you please keep Southeast Bakersfield together with Lamont, Arvin, and Weed Patch, a return to the traditional District 5. Okay, this board, to summarize or to conclude with Ms. Honeycutt's comments, this board has the ability to undo the dilution of the voting power of underrepresented rural communities. This board has the power to unrig our democracy and to undo the severing of the connection between the ballot box and the people's will. The Equity Coalition map is one that had much input from the community and represents all people in Kern County, and that is why I give it my full support. Okay, our third public comment written submission was from Tim Prado. Mr. Prado states, before I begin my statement, I am disappointed that the county is not engaged with the public in good faith. An example of this is today's hearing being handled at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, which does not allow for residents to give their opinion on how county districts should be drawn for the next 10 years. I live in Lamont, California, and I support the Equity Coalition map because I want to equalize communities of color by drawing 3 effective majority-minority districts with the 2020 census data. My idea wish is to keep Southeast Bakersfield together with Lamont, Arvin, and Weed Patch, a return to traditional District 5. Because these communities have similar issues of air quality, safe water accessibility, and lack of necessary infrastructure, and they should have a fair district with a supervisor that would advocate for the needs of these communities. Bear with me, I've got several more to go. Jacob Evans writes, my name is Jacob Evans and I live in District 2. My community and I support the Equity Coalition map. It was created by the community and draws fair and effective districts under the Voting Rights Act. And it keeps important communities of interest together. It keeps Rosedale with West and Northwest Bakersfield, and it keeps Oildale along shared geography of the Kern County Parkway. This area clearly needs support to address homelessness, and it needs to be kept together to effectively address these shared concerns. The Equity Coalition map also keeps important religious and ethnic groups in my community together instead of diluting their voice. Please support the Equity Coalition map. Thank you. Next is Manuel Rosas. Manuel writes, as a Kern County resident, my community and I support the Equity Coalition map because it allows for equitable representation for all residents. The Redistricting Equity Coalition map will address the educational and health concerns of our community members and empowers neighborhoods to choose their elective officials that best represent their concerns. Next comment comes from Kao-Ching Lau, and I apologize again, Mr. Lau, if I mispronounced your name. My name is Kao-Ching, and I am the Civic Engagement Table Coordinator for the Central Valley United Power, also known as CV-UP. I'm here to speak on behalf of CV-UP. CV-UP is a coalition of 8 community-based organizations, and they are Dolores Wertha Foundation, 99 Roots/Power California, Californians for Justice, the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, Community Water Center, Faith in the Valley, Hmong Innovating Politics, and Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. We build inclusionary and transformative people power across 8 counties, which are Kings, Kern, Tulare, Fresno, Madera, Merced, Stanislaus, and San Joaquin. We support the Equity Coalition Map 1 because it was created by the Community Demographer Guided 200+ community of interest surveys and refined by hundreds of Kern County residents every week since March. And 2, fair maps are long overdue. The Equality Coalition Map will help more communities together, keep more communities together. Let's get this next round of new district lines fair and right the first time. All right, next comment, Maria Blasco. My name is Maria, El Blasco, and I live in Bear Valley Springs, Tehachapi, Kern County, California. And I support the Equity Coalition map because it keeps really equal populations in each district, and it does not use political party or current supervisor home information. Next, we have Elizabeth Rodecker. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, Elizabeth. Of course, I support the Equity Coalition map for a variety of reasons, but mainly to bring Kern County in line with the 21st century values. We must not be at the bottom of so many lists anymore. Whatever it is, we often read that we are behind or at the bottom of many national lists. Child hunger, police brutality, poor air quality, and most notably and recently, the first in the U.S. for COVID-19 hospitalizations. Enough is enough. It is time for a change. We can accept the facts and make positive changes that will impact and improve our communities. That time is now. Additionally, it stops a cycle of lawsuits, a waste of all our tax money. Fair maps are long overdue. They could have been approved 10 years ago based on equity indicators like aforementioned. Please make a change and do the right thing. Okay, next I have Hortensia Cabral. I live in Board of Supervisor Area 2, and I support the Equity Coalition map because it accurately reflects all Kern County populations. I'd really appreciate a representative that genuinely cares and works for the Latino community, and if accepted under the new proposed District 4 map, I would be in a majority Latino district. Please note that I don't want to be included with Seven Oaks or other golf course communities. I want to be part of a middle-class, majority Latino community, and I think the Equality Coalition map for District 4 achieves that goal. It makes no sense that my community is currently married up with Tehachapi, Fraser Park, and Pine Mountain. Next is Robin Walters. Dear Supervisors, as an engaged member of District 3, I'm asking you to adopt the Kern Equity Coalition map. This map takes into account communities of interest, draws fair and effective Voting Rights Act districts, and stops the wasteful spending of time and money on lawsuits. Your actions have already cost us, the taxpayers, far too much in lawsuit spending. Your recent actions to deny a contract because of a political view is yet another example of subjecting your constituents to unnecessary and wasteful spending on lawsuits. Please follow your legal and moral obligations and make certain our districts are equitably drawn. I, along with hundreds of others, ask you to support the Equity Coalition map. Respectfully, Robin Walters. Next, I have Emma De La Rosa. Is she here? Sometimes she's here. I want to allow her to speak for herself as she is. Emma De La Rosa, policy advocate for Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I work with residents in unincorporated Kern County, specifically residents from Hilltop Fuller Acres, Lamont, Casa Loma, and residents from county islands within Bakersfield. Folks in these areas are all in different supervisorial districts despite facing similar issues: exposure to harmful pollutants, lack of financial investment in their communities, lack of affordable housing, and limited public infrastructure, including lighting, sidewalks, and sewers. It is important that our communities be granted the rights to effectively advocate to address their needs. Thus, I support the Equity Coalition map because it represents the needs of the aforementioned communities and is supported by residents. I have two more, Mr. Chairman and board members and audience, so please bear with me, that were recently handed to me. This is from Renee Westa-Lusk, and again, Renee, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Members, Board of Supervisors. Sorry, I'm requesting that we do not accept any maps or district line drawings that eliminates one of the two supervisor districts currently representing East Kern County, and that would put all of Kern County into one district. Eastern Kern County needs two supervisors because, one, the geography alone for one supervisor representing all of Eastern Kern would be unmanageable due to time constraints, not enough staffing, too large a landmass to traverse, and parts that are not contiguous by drivability. Two, one supervisor per military base is needed to represent each of the two military bases. China Lake and Edwards Air Force Base cannot be adequately represented by only one supervisor because they are from different branches of the services, and the issues for each of these is highly technical, intricate in nature, and extremely complicated and requires education to understand. Three, there are at least 24,000 direct defense industry jobs riding on the representation of Eastern Kern County. These jobs are mostly highly technical, typically higher paying with benefits, and will always be at risk with the future BRAC processes and downsizing during peacetime. We must have 2 supervisors representing these 2 premier military facilities for the national defense of our nation. Lastly, members of the board, I ask that you keep the current district lines to assure our current representation for both military bases. Thank you for your time and consideration. And this one was handed to me. Print's very small. Amanda, you want to take over for this? Showing my, it starts off the present district boundaries, I think.
All right, this is from Brett Bailey. The present district boundaries between districts 1 and 4 in the urban areas of Bakersfield do not any longer represent the area with geographical integrity and are in desperate need of redrawing after the growth of the last 20 years. The Rosedale area dominates District 1 and dilutes rural residents in the mountain districts and share very little with Ridgecrest. Thank you.
Okay. I apologize. I do have one more. Her comment made it sound like she was be here, but I don't believe she's here. So she did put a comment into the record that I will need to read. And I promise this is the last one, unless Kathy brings something up to me that I'm unaware of. Janine Adams. Janine writes, "It is very concerning to me that there is no remote access to the Board of Supervisors redistricting meeting today at 3 p.m. COVID is still running free in Kern County to the point that the National Guard has been deployed to help our community. Yet this Board of Supervisors has not provided safe remote access to attend this critical public redistricting hearing. 2, Kern County is a very large geographic area, and there are technologies to make it easier for those of us in outlying areas to have our voices heard. Although other redistricting hearings have been accessible via these technologies, today's meeting does not provide these technologies. Except for intentional exclusion from this process, it is difficult to understand this geographic roadblock considering technologies available today. For this reason, I must make a 1.5-hour round-trip drive from Tehachapi to attend this very important meeting. Item number 2 is a very major reason I support a community of interest, which includes the mountain and desert communities. By dividing this community of interest into several districts, our voices and concerns are diluted within the Bakersfield metropolitan communities that have much higher populations. Only by keeping our community of interest intact can we hope to have our voices heard. And that concludes the written public comments, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that were received to be read into the record. After 3 o'clock, we were, so anyone that provides something subsequent to us receiving it, we will publish on the redistricting website and make sure it's part of the record. But I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Wiebe. Ms. Pisante, about how long do you think you'll need for your presentation?
I think I might need about 7 minutes or so, if that's okay.
Okay.
I appreciate it. All right, my name is Lori Pesante, P-E-S-A-N-T-E, and I direct the redistricting program for the Dolores Wertha Foundation. And you've heard a lot about the Equity Coalition map. I'm here to provide some details, but it begins with a journey that began in January. Paulo Freire wrote in Pedagogy of the Oppressed that the solutions we seek are not going to be found at the top, they're going to be found at the bottom. And many, many people like myself and like folks in the foundation have been doing redistricting work because it seeks to tap into the power of the people over the course of 10 years. And so when we started meeting in January, we started finding other folks who also want to see the redistricting process put right what has gone very, very wrong in Kern County and many other parts of the Central Valley. So the Equity Coalition map has a layer on it that includes information from our history department at Cal State Bakersfield, racially restrictive covenant information. And we use that information along with a lot of other equity indicators to make sure that groups that have been systematically cut out of property rights and intergenerational wealth building would be empowered by this redistricting process. And indeed, the numbers you have in front of you are very, very clear. Kern County is 65.7% people of beautiful color. 65.7. It has been a long trend to see this demographic shift here in Kern County. It is high time that our maps finally reflect that. So the Equity Coalition map started bringing people into the fold, educating people. This is not an easy process. You're not going to wrap your head around it in 30 seconds, right? And so every week we met with people. We started collecting surveys, which, by the way, we based on the Luna case, okay? We taught people about the Luna case. We helped people understand the history that we are working with. And we absolutely 100% started with the Fair Maps Act. 2019 gave us a very, very powerful and important tool to get this right. And so we started with this back and forth every week with folks, and poor Mr. Garcia has been with us every step of the way. Can you move the line here? Can you move the line there? No, 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 that's gonna mess with my deviation, right? People, regular people being brought into the fold, and you heard a lot of them today, and you weren't at the other workshops, but they've been coming to all the workshops as much as humanly possible, despite issues with Microsoft Teams, right? Or not having Microsoft Teams, as is the case today. But our equal population, our deviation is 0.5%, which demonstrates that indeed, not only is it possible to get below 9.5%, oof, Mr. Garcia would never let us have a map with a deviation that high, come on now. But the second most important criteria there is the Voting Rights Act considerations. We want you to be in the best position possible to be stewards, good stewards of all our taxpayer dollars. This map absolutely puts you there. With District 5 at 83.7% Latino population, which of course is what triggers some of the considerations from your legal counsel in terms of where the obligation presents itself under the Voting Rights Act.
But what's CVAP, Lori? 83 Latino or 80?
CVAP for District 5 is 68.8%. Communities of color, CVAP, 79.4%. We're not just thinking about one particular protected class, we're thinking about all of them. The Equity Coalition map takes into consideration all constitutionally protected groups, all of them. It's not just about the Latino population, it's about the Black population, it's about our Native Americans, it's about our Asian population, it's about our Punjabi population, it's about our LGBTQ population. District 4, 71.8% Latino population, people of color, 86.1%. CVAP for Latino in District 4, 60.6%. People of color, 80.5%. And we're not pairing them with a gated community where the eligible voter turnout is like 98%, where they get outvoted every time. District 3 is probably my favorite because it's got 59.7% Latino population, but communities of color, 72.8%. Latino CVAP, eligible voters, 46.1%, but people of color CVAP, 61%. And that's where that racially restrictive covenant layer comes in. We wanted to make sure, and you heard there was testimony at your first redistricting hearing on that Saturday, identifying where the redlined community is. And in fact, in my presentation, I have these beautiful pictures from the Department of Agriculture of the Negro shantytown. We are swimming in a sea of history. These maps have got to reflect the future. We also asked for acknowledgement of communities of interest many, many times now. You have, of course, heard about the Mountain High Desert Rural Community of Interest. We asked for acknowledgement, which is kept whole in D1. We have asked for identification of the racially restrictive covenant neighborhoods maintained in D3. The Southeast Bakersfield, Fuller Acres, Lamont, Arvin weed patch alignment in what is a return to the traditional District 5. Southwest Bakersfield along Pumpkin Center, my old stomping grounds along Taft Highway. Rural farm worker communities dealing with a lot of the same issues, kept in the same district, District 4. And then, of course, West Bakersfield and Rosedale. And I used the point in time count to help guide the lines there along the parkway. Because what we see in the homeless point in time count, of course, is we've got folks in the downtown area, but they get pushed into the riverbed, right? We got to have some unification there, because the next 10 years, we got to have solutions from the people. And then, so we have community of interest that we'd like to have recognized in the Kern River Parkway of our unhoused populations. And we maintain them in District 2. The geographical integrity piece, which is number 3 in terms of order of priority for the Fair Maps Act, all census designated places and cities are kept whole in Kern County on our map, with the exception of Bakersfield, which of course would violate equal population to if you have to split Bakersfield. We're too big. And in no way, shape, or form did we use partisan data or look at any kind of supervisor residence or anything like that. Totally eliminated from the equation altogether. And a lot of other counties have actually passed ordinances requiring that they not have any of this data available to them and it not be used in the maps. So we
Ms.
asked—
Basante,
yes.
we're quite a ways over. Could you bring your comments to a close, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
So the law is very, very clear. And Kern County hasn't been asked to go through this process with that new law in place. So I really, really appreciate the attention being paid by your consultant to how to consider what that means for this group. I look forward to seeing your proposed maps and evaluating it using exactly the same criteria that the people have been asking for you to use as well. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Are there any other people wanting to speak under public comment before we move forward? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and bring it back to the board for any questions or comments from the board. Supervisor Perez.
I want to thank the community for coming out and sharing with us how you feel, your opinions, your expert and insights. It's really helpful. And really thank you, Lori, for your hard work, your passion, and for the collaboration that we express can be done under difficult circumstances as we find, solutions and procedures that, honor the tradition of who we are in Kern County and also give the people opportunity to be heard and their bite at the apple, of course. I want to give a special thank you to my chair, who I think was incredibly accommodating and gracious to the public. He always is, and I want to really say thank you. I appreciate you very much. And to all the hard work done to make sure that we receive all this information. I want to just remind you, these are really hard issues. They really are. And, everybody is beautiful. Every color, including white, is beautiful. Right? Some of my best friends and the best people I know in the world, are some Caucasian brothers and sisters. So, I just want to remind you, these are hard issues. They're hard for everybody. They're existential in nature, and so they tend to be driven by fear. And when we don't talk and give each other basic respect, then we're really not going to get far. And I want to shy away from that as much as possible. So again, thank you. Thank you for the accommodation. I think there's a productive way to have these kind of conversations. I've been having them a long time, and they have benefited me tremendously. And I think we can do that. So I want to thank you, ladies, for coming out, expressing your heart. Expressing what I believe is a lot of fear, frankly, and I don't blame you, and I don't judge you or anybody else. Okay, that's fair. That's fair, and I'm sorry that I'm sorry. I think this is a fearful period for a lot of people, and if you're okay, well, that's good. Good for you. But for those so I apologize for that. But for those who have some sense of fear about the future of Kern County, I have worked with the best people here, of all shapes and sizes, persuasions, and I believe in Kern County. I continue to believe in Kern County. I know what good people are here. I know the county family is here, and I know there are people up here that are really trying to get past their own challenges and what the future could look like for everybody. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, because these are not easy issues, I promise you. They're complicated for everybody. But hats off to what I think was a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I have a couple.
Supervisor Couch?
I recall when we were going through this a couple of years, or whatever it was, 2018, I was told that the county, I think we were all told, that the county board had three basic tenets that they tried to maintain when they did redistricting. One was to maintain 2 East Side districts. One was to not make what I'll call large wholesale changes. And the third was that all districts, it was either should have a mixture of urban and rural, or all districts needed a portion of Bakersfield. I don't recall which one. How was that? I don't recall this. Was that adopted by resolution 20 or 30 years ago? Or what do you know the history of that? And is that still something we should consider?
Supervisor Couch, through the chair, if I could, I'd like to refer to Attorney Chris Skinnell.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. To the best of my recollection, there was no formal adoption of a resolution of any sort. They were simply guidelines that the board followed at the time based on a historical practice. As far as this process, the Fair Maps Act changes things a little bit. The legislature has specified particular criteria, and so it may be that those historical criteria that Kern County has relied on, they may fit within those statutory criteria. If they can, are based on communities of interest and those other, the mandatory criteria that Paul listed. But the rules have changed considerably, and so it does need to comply with those new state laws. And if they require changes, then those historical practices will have to yield to that.
Okay, thank you for that. You might want to stay there. Did the decision or the stipulated judgment, or I've forgotten the legal terminology that we need to use, require that we have 2 minority-majority districts? And I think now there's a request for 3, but it required that it be 2, and that they were the 5th because of a previous decision and the 4th because of that court judgment, and that's still the same, or does it just require that we need to have 2?
Again, through the chair, Supervisor Couch, if I could refer to Mr. Skinnell, who was, I believe, involved in the Luna lawsuit.
I pause because it's a complicated question. The short answer is yes, there need to be 2. Whether they have to be exactly the same districts or not ultimately depends on whether those are cohesive, effective communities. And the testimony in that in that lawsuit in Luna was that those 2 districts, or some configuration of them, were going to be 2 effective majority Latino districts, and that's what the court found. That doesn't mean that there can't be any changes at all, but it does mean that we have to be awfully careful about it, because the court has concluded that the Latino populations in District 5 and the Latino population in District 4 are a cohesive community of interest that does need to be respected. And so it's a long way of saying wholesale change is probably going to be very difficult within those 2 districts. But some minor changes may be appropriate, particularly District 5 being underpopulated as it is.
Well, once you say you can't make major changes to 2 districts, it's harder to make major changes to any, really.
That is true.
You agree? Okay.
Yeah, it does influence then the remaining districts, because the Voting Rights Act obviously is, as federal law, is supreme over state law considerations.
Okay, and as I understand I've forgotten the name Ms. Pesante gave, or several people alluded to, the name of the
Equity Coalition map.
There you go. That request is to have 3 minority districts, or 3 voting rights districts. What's the actual request?
Well, I believe it's two majority Latino citizen voting age districts and one district, as I understand it. And I should say, we only just got the shapefile for that map this morning. And so redistricting partners and we haven't had any opportunity to investigate it. But my understanding is that there are two majority Latino districts, a third district, District 3, which is not majority Latino. The Equity Coalition is saying that the Latino population should be considered along with other minority groups. And whether or not that is a requirement of the Voting Rights Act is something we need to investigate based on underlying electoral patterns and everything else. And so because we just got that map, we don't have that information yet.
That sounds like a big thing to have to answer, an important thing to have to answer.
Yes,
so how long do you think that'll take you to research that?
We'll be working on it immediately. We'll have to pull some demographics, and we'll also have to go back through the record of the Luna case because I think it's going to have some information that will bear on that. Certainly, we will have done that analysis by the time we bring you maps at your next hearing.
Okay, and okay, I'm good. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Any other questions or comments from the board? I would like to ask our county council. I heard on one of the comments Mr. Wiebe made when he was reading the emails, somebody had an issue with us starting the meeting at 3 o'clock. Is that a state requirement, or how did that get mandated to be at 3 o'clock?
Mr. Chairman, the state mandate doesn't require 3 o'clock, but it does require time certain. Times. So as we've done with our previous the workshops and the other hearings, we have had them in the evening. We've had them on Saturday morning. And so we thought 3 o'clock is later in the afternoon than, let's say, at 9 o'clock. So that would help people. We've also have some upcoming nighttime events. We're trying to make it, recognizing that some people find daytime difficult, but each one is set at a specific time and is scheduled to start at that time.
Okay, thanks for breaking that down. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, so with that, I will turn it back over to our county council to provide us some direction.
Thank you. Actually, this is the part of the I guess the request where I would ask your board to provide direction to staff and our consultants to begin or to prepare the initial draft maps for subsequent submission to your board and the public.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I was just going to suggest that, well, first of all, we've had I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what you call the map, or what is it? Equity Coalition. Obviously, we should consider that. Okay, you were probably going to do that anyway. I'd like to give you some free rein just to say, knowing what you know about this process, knowing what you know about the law, knowing what you have heard from everyone, not just here today, but before and after today, what would you do, left to your own devices? Okay, I'd like to just see that from a third-party disinterested. That's what I'm assuming you are. You don't have a dog in this fight, right? Okay, that's another. And if there's more than one way to do that, don't confine yourself to just one. I had an idea 2 or 3 years ago that said, well, why don't we take the 5th, because it was the original voting rights district, and sort of leave it alone and divide the county up into 4 quadrants. The 5th kind of is right in the middle of Kern County. And the attempt there was to sort of give us some assurance of not having major changes going forward, because the county would be growing sort of all around Bakersfield, and Bakersfield would be growing as well, but we wouldn't have major population changes in the district, hopefully, if we did something like that. So could you take a look at an option that might look at something like that?
Yeah, and if we can make something like that work within the constraints that your legal counsel will provide us, then we'd be happy to bring that forward.
Okay. That's about it. That's all I've got for you right now.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Supervisor Perez?
Thank you. Supervisor Couch, that's not how I remember it. I remember that that suggestion you made would have literally taken me out of the 5th and the district that I had served up to that time and placed me in Delano, essentially into the 4th district. So unless I'm remembering something else, and please correct me if I'm wrong more than I'm right, but that's my memory of that.
There were two.
Okay, go ahead.
One was the one I just described, and the other was the 4th coming down, kind of nested inside the 21st Congressional District.
I do remember that now. You did propose two. So you then
I'm only referencing that one.
Got it, perfect. Thank you for the clarification, I really appreciate that. I'll just say that given the compilation of work, expertise, and heart, essentially, I would have to have a pretty good reason not to support what has been compiled through a long period of time. We haven't had many discussions on it, neither have I with my board, so I really have to reserve any real judgment until I get a chance to hear from our experts and we get to work together as a team. But I'm just letting you know that this seems like a compelling process to me. The amount of voices that we've heard from today, the diversity, the people I know individually and whose integrity I can attest to, I think makes sense to me. Again, I have to say that subject to where my colleagues go. They have interests that are important to me. We have relationships here that we have to balance, and that requires that we take each other's perspectives into consideration. That's a good process. So I submit that to my colleagues, that I will do that, and I will be honest and good faith in this process. I promise you, despite our challenges and differences. But for the public, I want you to know that there will have to be a very compelling reason for me not to support what I have seen, given its nature and its scope and the work that has gone in and its obvious expertise. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, there is a comprehensive, well-organized, vocal, articulate, educated, a very, very purposeful effort to come up with the map that's been suggested to us from the community. But I'm interested in how we weigh that with our other options. Just because it's the most vocal, just because it's the most organized, doesn't mean that it is the best answer. It means it is a very vocal, organized presentation. But I'm interested in what other options we have. Not to diminish that, but that isn't the only option just because it's the most vocal option. So as you look at what maps you might bring to us, I'm interested in the range of options that we have, not to diminish that, but also not to just acquiesce to it because it happens to be the most vocal group that has been before us. I'm interested in the comments from the attorney one more time about what responsibilities we have to the court's decision about having established communities of interest and whether or not we change those communities of interest. Do we open up ourselves to correction or criticism from the court once again? So could you give us a bit of perspective on that, please?
Yeah, and I apologize if I'm struggling with this, but it's a little bit of a balancing act. The short answer is that court found that these two districts are effective voting rights districts. And so for the county to make changes to them, it needs to make sure that it's not undermining those two districts. That doesn't mean that there are no changes that are appropriate, but any significant changes are going to potentially risk undermining the effectiveness of those districts. And so it's a bit of a balancing act. And as I said, the Equity Coalition map has some significant changes. We haven't had a chance to analyze the underlying demographics of that yet to see how that stacks up and compares against the current districts and the current map. And so that's analysis that we're going to be bringing back to the board at the future meetings.
Well, I want to make sure that we are carefully considering what obligation we have to the parameters that were established by the court before, so that we don't just throw those out. In the Equitable Maps Coalition options, it is of some interest to me that the third district, the one I represent, has been carved significantly out of, significant portions of it have been carved out in Northeast Bakersfield, but you can tell by the rather, most of the lines are kind of square and linear, but as they get to the old Stockdale area, they become much different than that. They appear to be, I don't know how they reach those conclusions, but I'm interested in why that is the case. And when things are contorted and twisted, I think it lends itself for people to wonder why. So that's of some interest to me. Lastly, as you think about what maps to bring to us when next we meet, will that be October 15? Is that what you said was the day you're going to present the maps to us?
The December 15th was the final date. I don't know that I have the exact date in October. Maybe your staff does.
The 26th is the next hearing.
October 26th, okay. So I'm also interested in light of the things I've said about the court's direction and the communities of interest, sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. And if the simplest answer is one district is a bit high and one district is a bit low and all the others are reasonable, is that the best answer? So I would be interested in your perspective on how we might do that in a more simple fashion so that is represented and on the table when we come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Scrivener?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to ask the simple question. Will one of the options that you're bringing back to us, when I'm saying you, I'm referring to our consultants with redistricting partners, will one of the options be a minor tweaking of the current map in light of the fact that we do have one district that is obviously overpopulated, one that is obviously underpopulated, and then a couple that are a little bit closer, and then one that's right at 0.1%. And listening to your comments that you said, where the court determined that the districts that we currently have provide for 2 effective voting rights districts, and I believe that you said that the court concluded the Latino populations are cohesive and need to be maintained. Is that roughly what you said?
Yes, that's what.
So in light of that, will you be bringing back to us a map that has the existing districts with some minor tweaks to account for the population deviations that we see with the census data?
Yeah, I think we anticipate that being one of the options that will be presented.
Thank you.
I had a question. I was kind of trying to think through it, but my question was more not just about communities of interest, but I guess about diluting the representative power of people that, for example, in the proposed District 1 with the Equitable Maps Coalition, I know that there's significant challenges in the current District 1 with regards to water and Ridgecrest and the desert area. I know that there are specific challenges in the current District 2 with, renewable energy, or, oil is a big factor in Supervisor Couch's district, and we all have our own big challenges in our current districts, but I guess, those are kind of related to, communities of interest. The water thing is inherent to the Navy base out there, but I feel like in this proposed map that we have here, some of these communities with really big, huge issues that are ongoing and that'll be ongoing for a long time to come. I mean, we'll be dealing with water long after I'm supervisor out in Ridgecrest. Is that a factor at all in determining that and ensuring that there's, that adequate representation out there? I'm sure that people at Ridgecrest would love to have Zach over there just as much as me, but I know that they have called my office quite a bit, wanting to make sure that they have that voice on the board specific to them that is, supporting what their issues are. And I know that each one of those districts that we currently have their own issues that we're all championing. And I'm afraid in a map that, lumps such a huge geographical area into one district, that advocacy might be lost a little bit. Is that something that could be considered as part of developing those maps?
The short answer is yes and no. So the Fair Maps Act does say that relationships with incumbent supervisors is not a community of interest and should not be taken into consideration in that manner. That said, they may have special interests that they feel need to be represented, and without reference to incumbent supervisors, you know, they would provide that feedback. And yes, interests related to water and Ridgecrest may very well be a community of interest that should be taken into account in the process. So yes, those are the types of interests that and they're the economic and social interests that would be potentially included in that.
Okay, great. Well, I've personally received quite a bit of feedback from the Kern River Valley and the Ridgecrest community in preserving that current model that we have, where there's 2 votes in Eastern Kern, where there's 2 representatives out there, because there is quite a bit of difference in that northern part of East Kern versus the southern part. But that's just my 2 cents on it. Supervisor Couch, did you want to jump back in there?
Yeah, I wanted to add something. Communities of interest, I want to ask you about. I know we think about them as, well, this city and this community, but then you also talked about, or I don't know if it was you or who it was, talked about ethnicity as one. What about where people work?
Yes.
You know, industries they work in, ag, oil, the military, logistics. And how much can we, that's one question. I don't need you to necessarily answer it. I'm not posing the question other than I'm posing it for you to consider, and if you want to respond, you can. How can we consider school districts and water districts, as well as transportation analysis zones? Now, that's something you probably have no familiarity with, but it might be important to have, you might not want to split those, is what I'm trying to say. Or you might want to group certain ones of those.
Right, understood. To answer your first question, yes, economic interests are legitimate communities of interest.
Okay.
You know, and from the Luna trial, agriculture was a significant one in the drawing of current District 4, obviously, and oil as well. And those are, you know, the concept of a community of interest can be very broad. It's whatever, you know, basically common interests they share, whether it be economic, whether it be social, whether it be anything else, that is concentrated in a place that you can put it into a single district. I mean, if it's spread all over the county, then that doesn't help. But if it's concentrated in a certain area, then that could be a community of interest. And really needs to be sort of related to what the county does. You know, so if they're focused on state parks, that's not necessarily something you're focused on. But it is, what I mean to suggest is it can be a very broad concept. And it could, to that point, could include potentially school districts. It could include transportation zones. It could include any of those things. If that's what people think of as an interest that they organize their political advocacy to the board around, and that's what is important to them, then that is something that can be taken into consideration.
I think we have this situation a little bit right now with the current map. Could you also take into account trying to square up, for example, I think the second and the fourth share, Zach has most of Taft, but I have a little bit of Taft.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same community.
Right.
Could we do our best to keep communities whole?
That absolutely will be a focus of the process, because one of the criteria specifically is to unify cities and census designated places. As Ms. Pesenti said, Bakersfield is too large. It's going to be split regardless, but the others are small enough that, yes, I was looking at the map, and there are several communities along the borders that are currently split, and it'll be part of the goal to unify them.
Lastly, what do we do with the people who are interested enough in this process to submit a map? Do they hear from us? Do we say thank you? Do we say congratulations? You win. We're going to adopt. What do we say to them?
There's no formal process one way or the other. I know that sometimes we have questions for them, and Paul may reach out to them and contact them, but most of the process is going to occur in public like this. And so if they're interested in their map, then they would be, you know, part of the public process.
Could we include that on our website somewhere, that they're probably not going to hear from us unless we have questions about their map? I don't know what their expectations are. Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. If I could, sorry, I see Jason's already standing, as so is Amanda. I believe Amanda has been personally responding to each email that we have received, but I'll let her tell you exactly what she is doing, but we are acknowledging to the receipt of information.
Yeah, so anytime we're getting public comment via email, we will, I will respond back to that to ensure that we've received that and they know that. In the future, that will be on our website, so that will be logged on there. Currently, we have all submitted community of interest maps and any proposed district maps, such as the Equity Coalition map. Those are all on our website, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Couch. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll ask our county council, does that provide adequate direction, or do we need to take a vote to move forward?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, I think collectively here, that the direction is to have the draft maps drawn. It seems like that's what everybody is in favor of.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Want a motion to that effect?
That'd be good, thank you.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
To draw maps to come back for our consideration.
Draft.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, perfect. Too many papers up here. Okay, well, having no additional items to consider, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, October 12th, 2021 at 9 a.m. Okay, yeah, and without objection, we are adjourned in honor of Jonathan Webster.
Get tested. Ask a doctor about the possible benefits and harms of PSA testing. Benefits include knowing your PSA